Hi, I'm Liz Smith, North Dakota Forest Service Forest Stewardship Manager, and this is part 2 of the Managing Mature Windbreak series on Windbreak Scouting. In upcoming weeks, we will discuss how to assess windbreak performance and techniques for managing a mature windbreak, commonly called windbreak renovation. Throughout the 4 segments, we will discuss tips, tricks, and lessons we have learned in the 150 or so years of growing and managing windbreaks in North Dakota. This presentation is part of the North Dakota Forest Service's Forestry Friday series. In part 1 of this series, we defined a windbreak or shelter belt as a tree planting established for the primary purpose of altering the flow of wind, and we described a mature windbreak as one that has slowed its rapid growth and is functioning in its intended purpose. We talked about the numerous benefits of windbreaks and how valuable the planted tree resources have been for generations of North Dakotans. Forests, whether native or planted, will not naturally remain unchanged forever. Over millennia, entire regions may become forested or lose forest cover. North Dakota was once a swampy tropical jungle. In a natural forest, trees of various ages and species compete with each other for available resources, with young seedlings filling gaps as old trees die. North Dakota's climate, topography, and soils would support a mostly grassland plant community outside of a few specific areas of natural forest. Our windbreak trees are not only competing with each other for valuable resources, but also struggling to live in a place more conducive to grass growth than tree growth. However, despite all these things working against them, we need our windbreaks to be functional year in and year out for generations. Windbreaks are planted to serve a specific purpose, and therefore each windbreak has a job to do. The right time to manage a windbreak is not after it has failed to do its job. Ideally, windbreak owners would be scouting their windbreaks regularly to catch potential issues before they start to impact job performance. Scouting a windbreak is simply about gathering information. This information, along with the performance assessment, will be used to make management decisions. And because no two windbreaks are exactly alike, no mature windbreak management plans will be exactly the same. Scouting and performance assessment are often done at the same time. But with scouting, we are just observing and gathering information. Remember, we are talking about a windbreak system, not about individual trees. You won't be cataloging every tree in your windbreak unless you really want to. The best time to scout a windbreak, I think, is in the summer when the leaves are on the trees. Before you go out scouting, remember that windbreaks have all of the same pokey and scratchy things that natural forests have. Plus, they often contain rusty machinery parts, tin cans, broken glass bottles, rock piles, broken concrete, and any number of discarded items that might cause you injury. The windbreak might also be a daytime napping spot for skunks or raccoons or other critters, and there will most definitely be ticks and mosquitoes. So, wear suitable clothing and sturdy shoes, apply your insect repellent, and bring along a camera or a phone for lots of pictures. You'll also need a tape measure. A couple specialized tools you should consider bringing are a core borer and a clinometer. And don't forget your field guide. This is not an advertisement for this particular field guide, just an example that there are field guides available that are particular to the region of the country, or particular, in this case, to North Dakota. The North Dakota Tree Handbook is available free online and is also a great resource. Exact age of a windbreak is really not overly important. What we really want to know is how close the windbreak is to its mature height and fullness. After a certain point, maybe 20 to 40 years, trees and shrubs usually slow their rapid upwards and outwards growth. So what we're really just looking for is clues to help us know if the windbreak has reached that point. This also helps us to compare the trees in the windbreak we're looking at to an expected standard to determine if some limiting factor might be at play. There's a chance that the original windbreak planting plan is still on file with either the Soil Conservation District, Natural Resource Conservation Service, or the North Dakota Forest Service. It never hurts to ask. If you can access the North Dakota GIS Hub, you can find statewide aerial imagery from the late 50s to early 60s, which will at least tell you if the windbreak was present in that location 60 years ago. On a spruce or pine tree, it's usually easy to count the whorls up to about the first 30 or 40 feet, which translates to the equivalent number of years of age. And of course, if you have access to a core borer, with enough practice, this is another way to determine a tree's age. You might be able to find an older aerial image or even a photo that shows the trees when they were young. Often, the windbreak owner or a previous owner, neighbors, or relatives can tell you roughly when the windbreak was planted. The first thing I like to do is make a sketch of the windbreak. If you have a recent aerial photo, print it out and bring it along just to write directly on it. I usually draw a line for each row and note the in-row spacing as well as the between-row spacing. You can use your tape measure or estimate the distance. You only need to be accurate to maybe within a foot to 18 inches. Often in an older windbreak, it's difficult to see the rows anymore, and if that's the case, I note that as well. I also note the heights of each species, and I'll take note of any gaps or missing trees and whether the gaps are distributed throughout the row or localized to one area. Take note of all the things on the landscape, like the landscape position, overall topography of the site, and any areas that appear to have been filled or altered. Also note things like the care of the windbreak. Are they mowing between the rows, thinning, trimming? Has there been firewood harvested? Anything you can notice about how the windbreak has been managed up to this point. Note where the property boundaries are and what is happening on the other side of the windbreak. Is it a field in crop production, a pasture, a road, a machinery yard? Look at the understory of the windbreak. Is there any natural regeneration happening? If yes, what species are growing? And don't forget to take lots and lots of photos. And especially if it's your windbreak, set up a couple photo points so you can note changes over the years and document the results of your good management. Take note of any evidence of damaging events that seem to affect all the trees equally, regardless of species or age. A section of windbreak drowned out by standing water is an example. Accidental fire or damage from a windstorm are other examples. Damage from livestock can be difficult to identify and can show up many years after the livestock are no longer allowed access to the windbreak. So I would call these like acute traumatic events. It can happen just one time and have lasting results, which sometimes may take years to cause the windbreak to decline or lose functionality. On the other hand, North Dakota is a tough place to be a tree. And of course, trees can't talk, so you may never know exactly what happened or is happening, and this can be very frustrating. Don't get frustrated though. Ask for help, and just remember, some management strategies can be applied regardless of the cause of the decline, while some are specific to a particular species. But there's a lot you can do without knowing exactly how the windbreak got to the place that it is. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get into renovation planning. For most people, the only intimidating part of scouting a windbreak is identifying each species and determining if there are any issues that might influence management choices. Young windbreaks are probably the hardest to identify because the young bark often isn't yet showing identifiable characteristics, and the trees may not be making cones or fruit or other things that we can use to identify them. It's often difficult for a novice windbreak scouter to understand if what they're seeing is normal or not. In North Dakota, we really see the same maybe few dozen species used in the vast majority of mature windbreaks, and because of this, we tend to see the same issues and conditions coming up over and over. So for the second part of today's discussion, I'm going to talk about some things that I commonly see in windbreaks. I'm going to use the common names for the trees and shrubs, the common names that we use in this part of the country, but I'm going to put the Latin names on the presentation slides. We're not going to have time to get into great detail, so I'm just going to go through about a dozen or so species and issues so that you see the kinds of things I commonly encounter, because you'll start to see them commonly as well. For many years, it seems like just about every windbreak in North Dakota featured American elm and later Siberian elm. They have an alternate bud arrangement and doubly serrated leaves. American elm leaves are usually larger than Siberian elm leaves. Both American and Siberian elm can become infected and die from Dutch elm disease, which is endemic in North Dakota, although it is still not uncommon to find a large tree of one or the other species present in a windbreak alongside dead and dying trees. Unlike our native American elm, Siberian elm will readily sprout from roots and is a prolific seeder. Our native green ash is a very popular windbreak tree and looks a lot like American elm. However, they are easy to tell apart because ash have an opposite bud arrangement. To my eye, the bark of a mature ash tree has almost a braided diamond pattern to it. Green ash also tends to be the last windbreak tree to break bud in the spring and the first to turn yellow in the fall. Green ash is one hardwood windbreak species where it is not uncommon to see yellow, marshmallow-looking growths on the old trees. These are fungal fruiting bodies and are a signal that the tree is decaying inside, a condition commonly called heart rot. Cottonwood is often the tallest windbreak tree you will see. It has triangle-shaped leaves and on a good site can tower to 80 or more feet and live a very, very long time. Female trees are notable for creating mounds of cotton surrounding their tiny brown seeds. Because cottonwood can be propagated easily with cuttings, male clones have been used to overcome this objectionable feature, and the Siouxland male clone released by South Dakota State University has been popular for many years. As the common name suggests, hybrid poplar can refer to any one of 100 or more crosses between two populous species. The vegetative cuttings will retain the characteristics of the parent cross, making them desirable, fast-growing ornamental trees. Young hybrid poplar look very much identical to their parent cottonwood. However, unfortunately, unlike native cottonwood, many of the hybrids lack the cold hardiness and longevity needed in a windbreak. So if you find a row of them in a mature windbreak, they often look something like this. Box elder is a native maple that is fast growing and tolerant of wet sites. They tend to sprout multiple trunks, and it's not unusual for a broken branch to fall on the ground and keep growing, giving them a bonsai tree-like appearance. Golden willow, a variety of white willow, has been used extensively in windbreaks and is especially tolerant of wetter parts of sites. It can be easily identified by its long, narrow leaves and namesake golden yellow bark on the ends of young twigs. It will hold up well for many years, and the main complaint is its habit of shedding branches. Russian olive is a small, compact tree, sometimes referred to as a large shrub, and its fruit do look like a small green olive. It has showy blue-silver leaves that it keeps well into winter, and it tolerates saline and alkaline soils and dry sites where few other trees will grow. It is favored by birds who then distribute the seeds into areas outside the windbreak where Russian olive easily outcompetes desirable native vegetation. Common lilac has long been a windbreak favorite. Flowers range from white to pinkish to purple, and they have a pleasant fragrance that many of us associate with springtime and the end of North Dakota's long, harsh winter. Like lilac, carigana, or Siberian pea shrub, has long been a go-to windbreak shrub. It is highly adaptable and has showy yellow flowers followed by yellow seed pods. The most common issue with lilac and carigana is that the shrubs tend to become leggy and brittle as they become old. Carigana especially has a habit of escaping the windbreak into unmowed pastures and road ditches. Native chokecherry is another favorite windbreak shrub. Its sour fruit are prized by humans and wildlife alike. Unfortunately, black knot fungus is quite common in chokecherry. Several species of honeysuckle are commonly found in mature windbreaks. Honeysuckle perform well on many different sites and rarely have any pest or disease problems when seen in windbreaks. Unfortunately, honeysuckle does have a habit of escaping windbreaks and becoming a hard-to-kill pest plant. Like chokecherry, American plum is another native shrub prized for its fruit. Hardy and long-lived, American plum does sometimes suffer from black knot fungus, but the main complaint is its habit of forming dense, spiny thickets that can make windbreak management challenging. Many different trees are called cedar, but in North Dakota, we are generally referring to a species of juniper closely related to our native Rocky Mountain juniper. Both small conifers are very similar in form and appearance and sometimes planted together in the same row. They are very drought tolerant and hardy, and we rarely see issues that impact their performance in windbreaks. Though not native to North Dakota, Colorado blue spruce and Blackgill spruce have become favorite windbreak trees. The photos above make them look quite different, but in reality, when planted together in a row, they are difficult to tell apart. Both can range from greenish to bluish in color, and both have the classic Christmas tree shape. The cones of the mature trees are very different looking, but in a mature windbreak, they will be very high up. Another identification trick is to grasp a branch with your hand. Colorado blue spruce has needles that are truly needle-like and spiny. Black Hill spruce needles are much softer. Unfortunately, as much as we love our spruce, we see many issues with it in windbreaks. Spruce are intolerant of wet sites and will die quickly if allowed to experience standing water. Spruce are also prone to needle cast disease. Native to southwestern North Dakota, ponderosa pine is used in many successful windbreak designs. The needles are much longer than spruce needles and arranged in clumps rather than in a row down the branch. Like spruce, ponderosa pine does not tolerate standing water and prefers a drier site. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of all species commonly found in North Dakota's windbreaks, nor are these all the issues commonly found. I focused on the species and issues that I see most often and encourage you to go scout your windbreak and see what you find. In fact, get out in as many windbreaks as you can. In the next part of this series, we will talk about how to give a windbreak a performance assessment, and later we will bring all this information together into a management plan and discuss various renovation techniques.